Hi everyone, we'll move on to the module 2 which will deal with unit 1 ethics in human interface. Let's see what are the things that we'll discuss in this particular chapter. First is essence, determinants and consequences of ethics in human actions. What will happen if you are ethical while acting and while taking decisions, and what are the negative consequences if you are unethical in your actions and in your decision making. So these are some of the things we'll deal with. Next, we'll deal with determinants of ethics. Here what we'll discuss, we'll talk about whether ethics is permanent in nature or not, whether it is universal in nature or not, or it shifts from person to person, or it varies from time to time, or place to place. So these are some of the things we'll discuss under determinants in ethics. Now, consequences of ethics means either we'll have positive consequences or we'll have negative consequences. What are the plus points of being ethical? What are the benefits that you will reap if you are ethical in your personal life or in your professional life? What are the negative consequences if you are unethical in life? If you indulge in corruption, today or tomorrow you might get exposed and you might get terminated from your service. Further, you will also have a lot of defamation. So these are some of the consequences of ethics, positive consequences and negative consequences. Next is dimensions of ethics. Now, we had discussed briefly in the last module also that there are 4 dimensions possible. One is meta-ethics, which deals with the philosophical aspects. What is ethics? What are morals? We come down to very fundamental questions. We ask questions like, why should I be moral, etc. Next is descriptive ethics, which is just a description or a narration of what is ethics in a particular society, in a particular state or country or a particular community. It only describes ethical concepts as it is, as practiced in a particular place or community. Next is prescriptive. It means what a person ought to be, what an individual should be ideally like. So these concepts. So a person ideally should be very honest, truthful, upholding integrity and things like this. So this is prescriptive ethics. What is being prescribed as ethical or good. Next is applied ethics. How we are applying the knowledge of the ethical concepts into a wide category of fields like ethics in warfare, ethics in sports, ethics in biotechnology, ethics in environment, and so on. Next, we'll briefly talk about conscience. What is the meaning of conscience? How conscience can guide our behavior, our actions, and decision making. So this is broadly the syllabus that we are going to cover in Unit 1, Ethics in Human Interface. Now here I'll take a pause to emphasize on how knowing your syllabus is very important in your mains preparation in general and particularly your ethics syllabus. So when you understand ethics syllabus, you can incorporate some words from those syllabus pointers and include in your case studies solution. For example, you have a case study. And how will you begin your case study? You will write the introduction. In the introduction of your case study, you are supposed to summarize the case. How you will summarize the case? You will take keywords from the ethics syllabus and you will summarize the case. For example, there is a dilemma and the civil servant is not being able to decide between two things, environment or development. So here you will summarize the case writing that the case study deals with an ethical dilemma between environment and development. The case study deals with a dilemma between personal interest versus public interest. So these are the words that you will fetch from the syllabus. So knowing your syllabus becomes very important when it comes to your ethics paper. Now let's take up a question which is actually a previous year question of 2017. Let's see what the question is. What is meant by crisis of conscience? Narrate one incident in your life when you were faced with such a crisis of conscience and how you resolved the same. Now, please understand that such sort of questions come very frequently in your GS paper 4, wherein they particularly ask questions from your life incidents. They ask you to bring out examples from your own life experiences. So while reading the question, don't forget to mark and read so that you do not miss out answering on any particular part. For example, the first part of this question is, you will explain what is crisis of conscience. First part. Second part of the question is, you will narrate one incident from your personal life where you faced crisis of conscience. That the second part. The third part is, how did you resolve it? That is the third part. And fourth part will be the conclusion. See, if you don't mark and read, if you don't put these marks as 1, 2, 3, 4, it is highly likely that you will miss out on one or two parts. And if you miss out on one or two parts, you will miss out on at least 2 to 3 marks per question. 2 marks per question means 13 questions are there, 26 marks you will lose. Now, keep in mind one very important thing. In the ethics paper, the margin, the range of marks is very high. So if you are performing very average, you will get somewhere around 80 to 90 marks. If you perform really good in a normal year where not any particular subject is being scaled up, in a normal year, I think around 120 plus marks is a very, very good score. So what is the range? 30 to 40 marks is the range. So this is the nature of ethics paper. So do not sideline it. Do not underestimate it, because if you read reasonably, you can be in that range of 120 plus. All right. So let's start. Let's see how to attempt this question. Please use markings while reading your question so that you do not miss out on any particular part. So approach, let's see what will be the approach to this question. First, in the introduction part, what you will write? Explain crisis of conscience. What is crisis of conscience? It is a status of guilt, or it is a situation of worry wherein a person feels that he or she has done something wrong, morally or ethically, right? Crisis of conscience, if I am facing such a situation of crisis of conscience, it means that I am feeling worried, I am feeling sad. Why? Because I feel that I have done something wrong. So if I have to explain in very simple words, crisis of conscience is a situation of guilt or worry, thinking that a person has done something morally wrong. Let me write, it is a situation of guilt because a person feels that he or she has done something morally wrong. Now, next part of the question is, you have to narrate one incident. Now, you can write it in a para format. One incident that I would share from my own life. During my preparation days, I had optional anthropology. So I was reading the resources and I converted those resources into notes according to the syllabus. So what my strategy was, I had in mind that I had to prepare short notes, 1 to 2 pager notes for every syllabus topic. Now what happens is, in a course of 1 or 2 years, some aspirants come to me asking for my anthropology notes because they feel I have done a lot of effort and I have created very good notes. Now, when they ask me for my notes for the first time, I refuse to share my notes with them. I say that I don't want to share my notes with you people because I have done a lot of efforts and you make your own notes. So I go back home, I feel situation of crisis of conscience, I feel bad, I feel worrisome, I feel guilty that I refused to share my notes. That is not what I learned from school. That is not what I learned from my family members. They have always taught me to be selfless. They have always taught me to share things with others. So under such circumstances, when I'm feeling guilty, the next day when I go back to the reading room, I call that person who asked me for my notes. I called that person, I give my notes to him and say that please don't copy my notes as is. Rather than that, you use my notes and make your own notes from these notes. Don't copy each and everything. use it as a reference, and you create your own notes from my notes. So this is how I resolve it. All right, so this is one example from my personal life. You can have your own examples, and when you write the example, make sure that it is in two parts. What is the situation, and also how you will resolve it. All right, that will only make your answer complete. Now finally, this is the second and third part. Finally, in the fourth part, you will conclude in one or two lines saying that crisis of conscience is common. It might happen to anyone because we are all human beings at the end of the day, and to err is human. As human beings, we all make mistakes, we all are prone to errors. But how we rectify our errors is what makes us moral agents. So what should be done is, if we are facing a crisis of conscience, we should try to sit, think, introspect, listen to our voice of conscience, and try to implement what our inner voice, what our inner soul is telling us to do. That way, we'll get rid of that moral dissonance and be happy again. So this is how you can resolve a crisis of conscience. One more example, general example that you can quote is that of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. It is a good example of crisis of conscience. What happened is, his own sister-in-law, SIL means sister-in-law, she committed sati. And so this led to a situation of crisis of conscience for Raja Ram Mohan Roy. When he was undergoing this mental and moral dissonance and turmoil, he thought that this is the right time, I have to resolve it anyhow. And this is how he started working against the practice of sati and finally successfully abolished it. So this is one general example that you can discuss about. So now we'll discuss what is ethics, what it means, and how it is different from morals. So what is ethics? These are certain moral guidelines, or these are certain ethical standards, some basic fundamental standards that we keep in mind while taking an action or a decision. So these moral standards, it helps us to distinguish between right and wrong. So these are certain standards that help us distinguish between right and wrong. It helps us in taking right decisions. So let's read moral principles that govern a person's behavior or conducting of an activity. So ethical standards are something that we keep in mind, and they act as a guide. They act as a direction in which we should take a decision, in which we should act. Ethics is concerned with what is good for the individuals and society, and is also described as a moral philosophy. So ethics is actually a collective concept. It is not individualistic. So it is something that deals with a group. The group totally, they have come together to decide some standards. Say 1, 2, 3, 4. Some standards as a collective group. So it will be implemented collectively, and when implemented, it will lead to the good of the entire group and not the individual alone. So it is a collective concept and it is a group concept. What can be the examples? Examples can be homosexuality. It is unethical in the Indian society. Next example can be vegetarianism. Vegetarianism is what? Ethical in Indian society. Another example can be what? Girls drinking liquor. Highly unethical in Indian society. So these are some of the examples of ethics. Now let's see what are morals. Like we briefly discussed in the last module, what are ethics and what are morals? They are more or less same. Both of them are standards, and both of them help you distinguish between right and wrong. But morals are extremely personal in affair, and ethics is a collective concept. Morals are an individual concept. What is your personal opinion about a particular issue? But when it comes to ethics, it is a collective concept. The group together decides what are those standards, what are right and what are wrong. It is a principle of right or wrong and how individuals should behave. It is based on personal conscience. It is my own opinion on a particular issue. So all the three examples that I just took for ethics, like vegetarianism, like homosexuality, like alcohol consumption by women, I can consider all these to be moral. It is my personal opinion and no one can question it. I can go ahead and marry an African national. It can be moral for me. But the society, the community that I belong to, it might be unethical. For example, intercaste and interreligious marriages. I find it moral, but the society or community that I belong to, they consider it as unethical. So something may be ethical or unethical does not matter. It can still be moral. My personal opinion can be favorable to that particular thing. For example, take the women entry in Shabarimala, right? So it is extremely divided. Some of the groups, they find it unethical. They find the entry of women to the shrine very unethical. But I might have a different opinion. My personal opinion can be that women entry should be allowed in the Sabarimala. It is moral. There is nothing wrong in it. So this way, morals are different from ethics. So moral, in very simple words, it is your personal opinion. Ethics versus morality. Morality can be individual set of commitments. Morality is a I concept. Okay, it is my individual opinion and it can be rejected by others. I believe that women entry to the Sabarimala, I'll write this example, Sabarimala shrine. I believe that it is moral, but my friend XYZ may believe that it is immoral. For my friend, it may be immoral. For my family members, it may be immoral. So, morality is an extremely personal affair. But one cannot be ethical alone. Ethical standards are socially accepted. So, ethics is a we concept. It's a social concept. It's a group concept or a collective concept. So, I cannot be ethical alone. I can be moral alone. All right. So, keep these things in mind. Morality does not demand acquiescence from others the way ethics does. Suppose an entire community decides that they will not go for intercaste marriages. So for this entire village, intercaste marriages is unethical. All right. Take a second example. Suppose an entire community decides that they will marry off their children before the age of 20. So this particular standard, this particular ethical standard of getting their children married off before 20 years will be considered ethical by that entire community. All right. We'll move forward. Ethics versus morality and example. As an individual, it may be immoral for a person to indulge in violence. But as a police officer, he is ethically bound to protect the interests of the nation by the use of force if the situation demands. So, an IPS officer, as an individual, as an IPS, as a normal individual. So, the standards for this normal individual can be non-violence. But as an IPS officer, this standard will become violent if necessary, right? So as an IPS officer, you cannot say that I am a private entity, I am a personal self, and I will not be violent come what may. So that type of stand you will not be able to take as an IPS officer. As a private entity, as a private individual, you can feel that your standards are non-violent. So non-violent is something that you would like to adhere to. It will be your morality. But as the same person becomes an IPS officer, when the situation demands, whenever there are protests, to control such hostile situation, you might have to indulge into little bit of violence also. Next, we'll move on to determinants of ethics. We had discussed to some extent in the previous module also what is the determinant of ethics. Like I said that ethics is not universal, it is not permanent. It is subjective and it is immensely contextual. It will vary from place to place, person to person, and time to time. So let's see one by one. For example, place. Consider spitting or maybe punctuality. Punctuality is a value or it is considered very seriously in Japan but not in India. So what is ethical in Japan may not be ethical in India, right? Spitting in India versus Western countries. Spitting is considered very seriously in the Western countries. So what is ethical in what is unethical in Western countries need not be unethical in Indian context. So ethics changes from place to place. Now let's see the time frame. Consider sati. It was considered very much ethical in the ancient times. But after its abolition by Raja Ram Mohan Roy, it is considered highly unethical. So depending on the time frame, it has changed. Sati was ethical once upon a time, but after its abolition, because of the efforts of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, in the present times, it is very unethical. Let's see the person part. Let's take the example of a girl smoking or drinking. In Indian society, if a girl is smoking or drinking, it is considered highly unethical. But if a boy is drinking or smoking, it is not considered that much unethical. So the concept of ethics differs from person to person. So that is how. Let's see some of the other determinants of ethics also. First, nature of the act. Is it voluntary or involuntary? So what do I mean by that? For example, there is an element of coercion on you. You are a bureaucrat. There is an element of coercion from political side. From whom? Maybe a minister or a political leader. That political leader is threatening you that you ignore the illegal sand mining, you take cash from me, and you lend a blind eye to all these illegal activities. You are being threatened that if you don't lend an eye to all these illegal activities, your family will be in deep trouble, and also you will face a lot of personal hardships. You will be frequently transferred from here to there. So there is an element of threat, there is an element of coercion. So under such circumstances, if you choose to ignore the illegal sand mining activities, then it will be not that much unethical. Now the next determinant of ethics is intent of the act. Was it done with a good intent or bad intent? Now just understand like a story. On one hand, you are driven by a lot of greed and you are trying to plan a robbery in a bank. On the other hand, imagine a situation wherein you are stealing from the medical shop because you don't have money and you want to steal a lifesaver drug for your mother who is ailing. Compare the two situations. On one hand, the intent is greed. On the other hand, the intent is to save a life. So depending on the intent, your outcome or your decision or action will be considered less ethical or more unethical, right? So in the first instance, where you are planning a robbery in a bank, because of greed, your act will be considered very unethical. On the other hand, you are trying to save your mother's life who is ailing, and you are trying to steal a drug from a pharmacy because you don't have money. The intent here is very pure. The intent here is very good. So your act of stealing will not be considered very unethical. Let's see the third determinant of ethics, circumstances. Ordinary versus extraordinary. Take the example of AFSPA. So there are a lot of restrictions being imposed because of this Armed Forces Special Act. It is often in news because criticisms are always revolving around this act, and it is being implemented because of extraordinary circumstances. There is a volatile situation, there is a hostile situation, and to control all such situations, armed forces are deployed in certain areas of the country to keep the situation under control. And because of this implementation of the act, the common people, the civilians, have to face a lot of problems. Their privacy is being undermined and they have to face a lot of restrictions compared to other areas. So if AFSPA is being implemented in a normal area or a normal place where there is no extraordinary situation, then it is unethical. But the same AFSPA, if it is deployed or implemented in an area where the situation is extraordinary, the situation is very hostile, and there are safety security issues, and therefore the armed forces have been deployed there, so that makes the implementation of the act less unethical. So these are some of the determinants of ethics. We have to judge or come to a conclusion whether something is ethical or not depending on all these things. It depends on place, it depends on person, it depends on the time, it depends on the nature of the act, whether there was an element of coercion or threat, whether there is any extraordinary situation prevailing. So all these factors we have to keep in mind before labeling an act as unethical or ethical. So now we'll discuss about sources of ethics. So ethics is nothing but a set of standards or guiding principles. So where from do we arrive at these standards or guiding principles? So let's see the source of this ethics or the sources of these standards and guiding principles. First is the law of land. For example, we have an act called Prevention of Corruption Act. So this law leads to the ethical standards of refraining from corruption. So let's see the second one, religious values. Religious values, take the example of Bhagavad Gita. What it emphasizes on is duty for the sake of duty. You keep doing your duty, do not expect outcomes. Outcomes will come automatically, but don't do duty expecting some outcomes. Do duty as an end in itself and not as a means to achieve some outcomes. So it emphasizes on duty, and this leads to ethical standard of dutifulness, right? Next, let's see, personal values also lead to ethical standards. For example, I believe in integrity. So what I will do is, what is the moral standard or ethical standard that I will lead to? I will become a trustee of resources. I will not use those resources for enriching myself or becoming more rich. I will use these public resources for the welfare of the people themselves, because my personal value is integrity. So I will not choose the wrong path even if no one is watching me. I will always act as a trustee, taking care of the public resources and use those resources for their own welfare. Next is social values. The society emphasizes on respect for elders or respect for women. So this will lead to what moral standard? Respect, dignity, right? Next comes your culture and traditions. Culture and traditions. Take the example of tribals and their bond with the forests. So the relation between the tribal population and the forest is like a parent-child bond. They don't treat the forests as merely forests. They treat those as their gods, their parents, and they would not like to stay away from these forests. So that's the reason. What do they uphold? Protection of nature and environment. Next is conscience. I'll take the same example, my UPSC journey, and when I had prepared my notes for anthropology, one junior had asked me for my notes and I had refused to give him my notes. Later on, when I tried to hear my voice of conscience, and next morning what I did is I went to the same person and said that please take my notes, but do not copy right away. Do not copy everything that is there, because I have done a lot of hard work. What you do is you take it as a reference and make your own notes from there. So this particular voice of conscience or voice of soul acts as a guiding light, and it helps you set certain standards. In this case, the standard that I could set is selflessness, sharing and caring. So these are some of the things that help you come to some standards that you will follow while taking decisions. Law of the land, religious scriptures or religious books, family and society and culture, personal values, conscience. So these are some of the sources of ethical standards. So now let's see what is the essence of ethics. Essence means what is the summary or crux. It means what are the features that can define ethics. So first of all, ethics cannot be developed in isolation. So just try to understand that as a child, as a kid, did you have any ethical standards? You did not know what is the difference between right or wrong. You did not know that slapping your younger sibling is not ethical, is unethical. Or maybe killing any insect or any animal unnecessarily is unethical. So, as a child, as a kid, you don't know these things. How do you develop all these? As time goes by, your family members, your relatives, the society, other people, teachers, and your friends, all of them teach you small things, and you develop these ethical standards, right? So first and foremost point is that ethics cannot be developed in isolation. It's a social concept. You learn ethical standards by being a part of the community. For example, the Indian society, your family members teach you respect for elders. What else do they teach you? They teach you to touch the feet of the elders and seek their blessings. So, in some societies, you are expected to touch the feet of elders every day to seek their blessings. And in some other societies, on festivals or important days, you are expected to touch their feet and seek their blessings. So, these are some ethical standards that you don't learn on your own, but your family members and relatives teach you. Next very important pointer about ethics is that it is interrelated. That means, suppose I take 4 values: truthfulness, honesty, integrity, and probity. Can you have probity without truthfulness? The answer is no. So one is related to the other. You cannot be honest without being truthful. You cannot uphold integrity without having honesty. So all of these things are interrelated. You cannot be ethical in your personal life and be unethical in your professional life, and vice versa. So ethics is interrelated. Next point is it is contextual. It is not permanent or not universal or absolute. It is contextual. It depends on person to person, place, and time. A while back, we discussed that in Indian society, a girl drinking alcohol is considered highly unethical, but a boy drinking alcohol is not considered that much unethical. Similarly, spitting in Western countries is considered very unethical, but not at all unethical in India. Time, sati, once upon a time, it was considered very much ethical, but after its abolition, in the present times, it is highly unethical. So it is based on the context. Further, if there is an element of threat or coercion, and under such threatening conditions, if you accept a bribe or say some money or enter into a contract, then it is not that unethical. But under normal situations, if you do the same thing, under normal situations, if you take bribe or if you enter into a contract or agree to ignore the illegal activities taking place, under such normal situations, it will be considered highly unethical. So it is contextual in nature. So these are some of the features of ethics that you should remember. Now we'll try to understand what are the consequences of being ethical. What is the benefit if you remain ethical in your personal life and professional life? So we'll deal with it at 3 different levels: at the individual level, at the organizational level, and at the level of society. What are the benefits? What are the positive impacts on you if you are ethical in your actions and decision making? At the individual level, if you are ethical, that means you will be very happy in life, you will be logical, you will be satisfied, you will refrain from any moral dissonance, and you will lead a happy and contented life, right? You will have moral satisfaction, inner peace, and confidence. Let's see what will happen if you are ethical at the organizational level. The work culture will be very motivating and encouraging, and retention rate and effectiveness and efficiency will also improve. Now let's see at the organizational level what will happen if you are ethical. If you are ethical in an organization, the overall atmosphere or the environment, work culture will be very motivating. And if it is a motivating environment, more and more people will be retained in the company and they will not leave the company. Further, productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness levels will also increase in the company, and there will be a very motivating work culture. Now, let's see what will happen if you are ethical at the societal level. If a society is ethical, it will create social capital, mutual trust among all the elements in the society. There will not be any hostility. There will be harmony, peace, and happiness in the society. There will be peace and order. There will be mutual trust and social capital in the society. So now we'll see the dimensions of ethics or the multiple branches of ethics. There are 4 branches of ethics we had briefly discussed in the earlier module. The first one is meta-ethics. The second one is normative or prescriptive ethics. The third one is descriptive ethics. And fourth is applied ethics. Now we'll take one by one. So meta-ethics is something very philosophical. It asks basic questions like what is ethics, what is morality, what is the difference between ethics and morality. It is broadly philosophical in nature. You will ask very philosophical questions like what is ethics, what is morality, why should I be moral, what is the incentive to me to be moral when by becoming immoral I can gather so much money, right? So these are some questions that I ask in metaethics. It deals with questions like what morality actually is. It is philosophical in nature. Why should I be moral? You remember we had discussed an example of the Mahabharata. After the Vastraharan of Draupadi, she goes to her husband and asks Yudhishthir that why in this war you want to be so much ethical. So much of bad things, so much of hostility and violence, tragedies happened in Mahabharata, and so much Draupadi herself had to face. Under all these situations, why her husband Yudhishthir still wanted to remain so much ethical and moral? So these are some of the questions under meta ethics. Next is normative or prescriptive ethics. It is concerned with what is morally right or wrong. It is prescriptive in nature. It is like a doctor's prescription. What you ought to be. Ideally, what should be correct. Alright, so these are some of the questions that is asked in prescriptive ethics. There are 3 approaches under this: deontological approach, teleological approach, and virtue ethics. We'll take it up one by one. So normative ethics or prescriptive ethics, I believe it is clear to you. It is like a prescription. Doctor's prescription, something like this. The doctor prescribes to you 1, 2, 3, 4 do's and don'ts, right? The doctor says, take this medicine 2 times a day, take this medicine once a day, don't drink cold water, something like this. So similarly, normative or prescriptive ethics is also like a doctor's prescription. It tells you do's and don'ts, what you ought to be doing, what you ideally should be doing, right? Now there are 3 parts. Deontology means duty for the sake of duty. It means it is means oriented. It does not care about the outcomes. Suppose as a UPSC aspirant, you are working really hard for say 2-3 years, but still you are not able to clear maybe prelims. You are doing your bit. You are doing your duty very diligently. So deontological approach says that don't worry about the outcomes. Keep doing your duty. As long as your means are good, as long as you are doing your duty, you don't have to worry about anything else. That's what deontological approach says. As an aspirant, you are doing your part. The other things are beyond your control. Getting selected or not getting selected is not in your control. So just ensure that the means are good. You do your duty, that's it. Next, come to teleological approach. Teleological approach means ends are more important. Deontology mein means are more important. It is only about means. You focus on the means, don't focus at all on the ends. Teleology says you focus only on the ends. I need you to be selected. I don't care how you will be selected. You will cheat and pass the exam, or you will do hard work and pass the exam, is not my lookout. You have to be selected. As long as you are selected, I don't care even if you have used wrong means to get selected. A wrong means can be justified if the ends are good. That is what teleology says. Virtue ethics means that the agent, the actor, the person in question should have a virtue, and as long as that person has a virtue, that end will be good or ethical. So if I am a moral agent, then whatever I do will be good. Whatever outcomes I produce will be good. So these are the three approaches. Quickly, I'll repeat this for you. Deontology focuses only on the means. It asks you to focus only on the duty part, forget the outcome part, because outcome is not in your control. Second is teleological approach says that even a wrong means can be justified if your ends are good. So it focuses on the end or the consequence part. The third is virtue ethics. As long as the person is a moral agent, as long as the person is virtuous, I don't care what the outcomes are. So these are some of the dimensions. Moving forward, the third dimension is descriptive part. Like you can see in the word itself, it only narrates or describes. For example, if a tribal population or a tribal community is very obsessed about forests, or it treats environmental aspects as ethical, a description of this entire concept will be descriptive ethics. It is a simple study of what is ethics in a particular community. In Singapore, altruism is considered as a very important ethical concept in the society. So that's why the doctors, before they are allowed to practice medicine, they are first sent out on some selfless service to the poor people and vulnerable sections. And that's how a description of this entire thing will constitute descriptive ethics. Similarly, another narration or description of how tribals emphasize on the importance of forests and nature is again coming under environmental ethics and will constitute descriptive ethics. It's a simple narration of what a particular society or community treats as ethical. For that particular tribal society, what is ethical? Environmental ethics is ethical, and so brief narration of that will be coming under descriptive ethics. Now, the fourth part is applied ethics. It means that you are applying all the knowledge of the ethical concepts into broad categories like sports, like warfare, like environment, like bioethics. You are applying your ethical concepts into these broad categories. Now, using these standards, you will assess whether doping, whether ball tampering, match fixing is ethical or unethical. You will understand here what are the ethics of warfare, how you will treat the prisoners of war, how you will treat a injured soldier. So these are the things. Environmental ethics means how will you decide between developmental projects and nature. Bioethics, what is the ethicality of designer babies? So these are the concepts under applied ethics: cyber ethics, bioethics, environmental ethics.